Chag Sameach, everybody. Want to welcome you all to a very, very special conversation with a dear friend, a classmate of many, many years ago, Rabbi Naomi Levy, who joins us from Los Angeles, part of the blessings of her generosity and technology, which we have all come to value afresh in the last 16 months. And I want to begin as I introduce Rabbi Levy to you. We also may have members of her community from Nashuva joining us, which I hope we do, who know her quite well, of course. And many in our own community may remember visits from Rabbi Levy when she would come a little bit more often to see her mom, of blessed memory, Ruth Levy, who 10 years ago exactly left us. I think it was right around Pesach time, as if I'm not mistaken. And I just want to share so this is all by way of saying that you can take the opinion of people like the leading news outlets, the networks, the leading magazines like Newsweek, opinions like those of Oprah Winfrey. You can take them, or you can take the actual experience you've had with Naomi Levy firsthand to take to be as impressive. But all of them have very, very high opinions, appropriately, of Rabbi Naomi Levy. But one of the things that she wrote to me in a book, To Begin Again, the first of 4 bestsellers that she has written, she wrote in a book that's dedicated to her beloved father of blessed memory and to her mother, who was then very much alive. Dear Bill, thank you so much for having me at your shul and for welcoming my mom into your community with such open arms. I wish you blessings. Yours with love, Naomi. So I again, from where I sit, I just am very, very moved by your work, by the ways in which you bring the beauty and the joy of Judaism to life. And I want to say a warm welcome, and I ask us all to warmly welcome a dear friend, colleague, and teacher, Rabbi Naomi Levy.
It's a joy to be here with you. And we had discussed that, my life's work has been having to do with emotional resilience in trying times. And we've lived through trying times, and now with everything that's going on in Israel, we're dealing with many, many trying times. So first, I just wanted to say that I hope in the end to come full circle and lead you in a prayer for Israel. But first, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being my mother's rabbi. Mm-hmm. You were her rabbi. You were my classmate, and you were her rabbi. And my mother, a blessed memory, Zichronah Livracha, Ruth Levy, was really a role model to me of what resilience means. She picked herself up after the murder of her husband, my father, George Levy, of blessed memory. And she was bereft of everything, living all alone in a house in Brooklyn, with all her children already grown and her husband murdered. And my brother Danny, who lives in Boston, really managed to convince my mom to move from Brooklyn to Brookline. And a woman who was bereft and empty, later in her years, lived to see joy, many grandchildren, community, and rejoicing. And as you know, my name is Naomi, and my mother of blessed memory's name was Ruth. So the book that we read on Shavuot is very, very near and dear to my heart. And it's a book that's all about suffering, faith, loss, resilience, and rebirth.
Hmm.
And Bill, it's been a very trying year, and so many people worry that we will be scarred for life.
Hmm.
That somehow it's going to be, there's depression and there's anxiety, and parents worry that their children have been scarred, what they've lost.
Hmm.
And many, many people have had financial setbacks. Are we scarred for life? And my message this Shavuot is, I pray not. So I would love to talk with you tonight about what this book has to teach us. The book of Ruth has to teach us about resiliency, new life, and starting fresh. And
Great.
I think I can start with a little story that really, really happened to me before COVID.
Please.
I was shopping in a boutique for a new pair of jeans, and it was a little boutique, and the owner kept like following me around, and she kept saying, "What else can I show you, Mara? Do you think you'd like to see this, Mara? I think these pair of pants you'd really love, Mara." And I just didn't have the heart to correct her, and I wasn't really sure why she kept calling me that. And I went into the fitting room, and she'd say, "Mara, I'm going to bring you another pair of pants. I think you're going to like them, whatever." And now I find a pair I want to buy, and I go to the cash register, and she says, "How would you like to pay for this, Mara?" And finally I just said, "My name isn't Mara, it's Naomi." And she said, "Oh, that's so weird. I don't know how it got into my head. Your name is Mara." And I said, "Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. In the Bible, the name Mara is the flip side of the name Naomi." And she said, "What?" And so I came to explain to her what I'm going to explain to all of you shortly. But first, I just want to say a few things about this book, the Book of Ruth.
Hmm.
First is, of all the books in the Tanakh, I regard the Book of Ruth to be the most subversive book. More subversive than the Book of Job or Ecclesiastes or anything else. Because usually the Torah wants to teach us about the men. And it wants to teach us about the ones who are the pillars of our people and our families. But the Book of Ruth clearly asserts that the pillars of our people and the pillars of our family are the women, the mothers. And in order to get to this subversive idea, what do they have to do? The author has to kill off all the men so that we can even begin, because it wasn't kosher to just talk about the women otherwise. They have to first kill off all the men so that we can start to see the world through the eyes of the women who are behind the scenes operating. And there's nothing like this anywhere in the entire Torah. No book in the Tanakh has more dialogue between women than this book. And in this book, it's not based, how we say, Abraham, right? He's the first convert, and he left his land and his father's house. The Book of Ruth only talks about your mother's house. And it doesn't talk about your father's faith. It talks about your mother's faith. And do you want to ask me anything until I keep going? Because I could really
keep going. This is terrific. So
the book starts like this. Once there was a man, and his name, V'shem Ha'ish Elimelech. His name is Elimelech. And you know what? It's all about people in relation to him. He comes with his wife and his 2 sons, and there's a famine. There's a famine in the land. And they have to leave Israel to go to Moab. And there they go. They go to Moab, and the sons marry there. And all of a sudden, in like a beat, this man, Elimelech, and the sons who have taken these Moabite women, they all die. And now we start the story.
Right.
And the story is Naomi. That's her name. The name Naomi means sweet, pleasant. She's left alone, bereft, with her daughters-in-law. The first one named Orpah. By the way, Oprah Winfrey got her name from this book, and her mother misspelled Orpah and named her Oprah.
Right. Right. By the way, I have to just add that I just read something really beautiful. There was one of my study partners, Barry Dove Wolfish, has an article that was published 2 days ago on Orpah. And what's fascinating is that the sages have nothing nice to say about her, right? The tradition is very, very, is pretty tough on her. But another chavruta of mine, Tamar Biala, who's sits in Jerusalem now, wrote this beautiful interpretation of Orpah, where she actually describes her not as somebody who gives her back to Naomi as much as somebody who's willing to try to move forward. And that I'd love to talk to you more about this as you continue your analysis of the book, the idea that Ruth's response isn't necessarily the only response, especially after a traumatic loss, that Orpah's and indeed Oprah's, become alternative responses, that it isn't an either or.
100%, 100%. And I don't think that the book itself treats her that way.
Right.
So the name of the first daughter-in-law is Orpah, the other Ruth, and here Naomi is bereft of everything and everyone. But these young women are so devoted to her, and they refuse to leave her. And she begs them. She says, go back to your mother's home. Go back to your mother's. Orpah doesn't want to. She refuses. And it's only after a while of Naomi begging her that she finally gives in and agrees to go home. But it says, Ruth davkaba. Ruth clings to her. And of course, this word davkaba becomes the paradigm for faith, dvekut. Like true faith, it becomes the paradigm of that, but it's also the word for deep, deep love, for romantic love. And that's what we say in the book of Genesis when Adam meets Eve, right? It's becoming so close, clinging to each other so close that you become one. That's the kind of love. It's devotional. And then, of course, after this davkaba, we get those devotional lines of love that feel like a marriage ceremony. Like a marriage ceremony. But it's not from a man to a woman or from a woman to her lover. It's from, of all things, a daughter-in-law to a mother-in-law, which is usually the paradigm for hatred.
Right. Everybody's got great things to say about their mother-in-law.
So, it's the paradigm for cattiness. It's the paradigm for envy and jealousy and fighting for a man's attention. But it's this very relationship, the relationship between daughter-in-law and mother-in-law, that becomes the paradigm of love. And I love those lines. Al tifge'i vi le'ozvech lashuv me'acharayich ki el asher telchi elech. Wherever you go, don't make me leave you. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you sleep, I will sleep. Your people will be my people. Your God, my God. Wherever you die, that's where I'm going to be buried too. I'm committing every piece of myself to you. And Ruth becomes the model, the paradigm for conversion. Usually we think Abraham, but it really, the way we convert people It comes from Ruth, both the fact that Naomi turns her away 3 times and we turn away potential converts 3 times. But this conversion paradigm, it undermines everything, every prejudice we Jewish people traditionally assume about conversion. You know the prejudices. Oh, she's only converting to marry him. He's only converting to marry her. It's not like real. It doesn't really count. But I love this conversion. It's like a self-conversion. She does it on her own. And she doesn't find God through a religious experience. She doesn't find God by looking at the heavens. She doesn't find God because she's like struck by lightning. She doesn't find God because she witnessed the parting of the Red Sea. She finds God through love. She finds God through relationship with somebody that she values, with someone she adores. And to me, that's the highest form of faith, is you meet someone whose faith is so integral to who they are that you say to yourself, if this faith led to this person, I want in.
Beautiful.
I want to be that. I want that part of that faith tradition. If this is what this person's faith has led to, then I want to be like this person and I want to cleave to this person. So that convert for love. Convert for love because it's true faith. And Ruth is the model of that true faith. And the other thing that Ruth becomes the model of for us, and we have to remember this when we're despairing over Israel right now, this story is a story about how eternal hatred of an enemy can give way to love. Not just acceptance, but love. And that's my prayer when we're looking at a situation between Israel and Gaza, Israel and the West Bank, inside Israel, and what's going on between Jews and Israeli Arabs, Israeli Jews and Israeli Arabs. And we can despair and we say, where is hope going to come from? But this story is the model for what can happen. In the book of Dvarim, the hatred for Moabites is so intense that there's an actual law. Lo yavo Amoni u'Moavi bekahal Adonai, gam dor asiri lo yavo lahem bekahal Adonai ad olam. An Ammonite or a Moabite will never enter the congregation of Israel. Even the 10th generation, they will never be welcome into our people, even to the 10th generation, because how cruel they were to us when we were leaving Egypt. It's a mandate. It's prescribed in the Torah. And yes, all through this very book, it's not just Ruth. She's always called Ruth the Moabite. Ruth the Moabite, just to make sure you understand the stigma of what she is, who she is, that she's an outsider, that she'll never be welcome, and what she represents. Ruth the Moabite. It's like there's a stigma, like an ot kain, like a mark of Cain on her. Ruth the Moabite. And yet, this book, it's one of the most beautiful literary writings in the entire Tanakh. And it's only 4 chapters long. And it really the whole book comes full circle. But an enemy becomes, in this book, not just accepted, not just welcome, not just loved. She becomes our matriarch, our matriarch. And the name Ruth, they're in the middle of a famine. There's a famine. And the name Ruth means watered. It means watered, as in the 23rd Psalm, Kosi Rivaya, my cup overflows. So her very name is a name that means nourishment. And she's going to water everything and everyone. So Naomi and this daughter-in-law, who is basically committed herself in all ways, in devotion, in love, in faith, to her mother-in-law, they go back to Israel, and now the famine, it seems, is ending, and it's the barley harvest. And the whole city is abuzz. In Bethlehem, it's so interesting that they left Bethlehem, which is the house of bread, during a famine. They come back to Bethlehem, and it says the whole city is abuzz. The whole city is abuzz. But it doesn't mean the whole city. It means the whole city of women are abuzz about the return of Naomi. And in just 2 words, you understand what's happened to this woman, Naomi. And all those 2 words are, in English, it's so hard to capture this. 2 Hebrew words, Hazot Naomi. All the women come, and they come look at her, and they say out loud, almost like in a gasp, could this be Naomi? And in that instant, you understand something. How she's changed. How whatever she suffered has made her unrecognizable. Like you can see her suffering. You can see it in her body. You can see it engraved on her face. Hazot Naomi? Could this possibly be the Naomi that we knew? This isn't the same person. She's unrecognizable to us. And then these beautiful, powerful words from Naomi to all of the gossip, right? Hazot Naomi, they're talking about her. They're not talking to her. She hears the gossip. Hazot Naomi, could this possibly be the Naomi that we knew? And she says, Vatomer Elehen, Al tikrena li Naomi. She says to them, to the whole city of women, don't call me Naomi. Krena li Mara. Call me Mara. Ki hema shaddai li me'od. Call me Mara because God has embittered my life so much. So first of all, now you understand why Mara is the flip side of the name Naomi, because that's the name that Naomi gives herself. Usually in the Torah, God gives people a new name. In this story, Naomi brands herself and she gives herself a new name. And she assumes that it's God who has done this to her. God has embittered me. God has done this. Like she's the full version of the why me? Why me? God has embittered me. God has done this to me. That's what she's saying. And you could understand that that's what real bitterness is. Real bitterness is when you blame God for what you're going through. Any questions up to now, Bill?
No, I mean, I think it's by the way, I just want to comment that I absolutely love the way that you frame Hazot Naomi, this notion that the love that brought her to commit every fiber of her being, future and destiny, to that brought Ruth to that point, right? I think that's incredibly powerful. And now this notion that Naomi is renaming herself based on, how unrecognizable she is. I think that too, I love the framing of just how these women are completely engaging in the kind of transformation and representing the kind of transformation and naming and everything else that normally is not associated with biblical figures at all, and certainly not female biblical figures. So I love the way in which you're really revealing the subversive nature of the text for biblical. It goes against the grain in so many ways that you're really lifting out beautifully.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's wild. Every time we have a biblical hero, it's a hero because God changes their name. And here she's suffering. And it's her suffering that is visible, and that she goes ahead and changes her name, and she blames God. That's who she is right now. She's bitter. She's recognizably changed to the point that she's unrecognizable. She puts the blame on God, and she changes her own name. And yet, let's remember, as much as she pushes, as much as she tries to push her daughters-in-law away, as much as she looks so down and out, so bereft, so much grief that you could see it, there must be something remarkable about this woman, who we'll call Mara right now, that would lead Ruth the Moabite to abandon everything and everyone, her native land, her mother, her father, all her relatives, her faith, and follow this woman into the future. It has to be, we have to assume that this woman is remarkable. And by the end of the book, we learn about how the bitter can give way to the sweet. How Mara becomes Naomi again. Because of Ruth. And together, these two women, there's a lot of scheming involved. And I guess in a time where the world is completely a patriarchy, women have to scheme in order to get their way. But this scheme, it leads to new life, new abundance, new fertility, new hope, and that Moabite, that stigma, not just becomes a matriarch, she begat King David. So she's like the mother of the monarchy, and she's the mother of the Messiah.
Yeah.
So she represents, this outsider represents the spark, the budding of not just the beginning of a new day, but the hope of salvation. And to me, what we've lived through in this past year and a half, um, I think if you take this book and sit with it over Shavuot, and literally, it's only 4 chapters long, everybody.
Hmm.
If you sit with it and read it line by line, you will be infused with a sense that things can open up, that everything that you assumed was dark can be light, that everything that you felt you had lost, that there can be a new day. You're not going to necessarily get back what you lost, but that there can be a new day, that there can be hope, that there can be comfort, that there can be a whole new life that's awaiting you.
Mm.
Question?
Yeah, no, I'd like to actually probe. First of all, I love your analysis, and I want to invite people to write in the chat or in the Q&A to express, and we'll make space for questions. I have a couple, though, that I want to just pick up on based on this way in which the remarkable transformations happen. Because in your first book, again, one of the beautiful things I want everybody to appreciate about what Rabbi Naomi Levy does for our generation is she gives us a spiritual vocabulary to be able to bring what's in our hearts to God. I think you wanted to call one of your books From Your Lips to God's Ear, but the publisher felt otherwise. The title was fine, but the point is that
We thought it would be like, it sounds like a joke.
Yeah, right, exactly. But one of the things you talk about in this book is you talk about false comforts, and you also talk about being able to live with scars, and I wonder if you'd say something about both of them. That is to say, on one level, there is the reality that sometimes you might think something is actually going to be helpful, but I think you call it a false comfort based on where it leads and what it does to you, right? And I think at the time you're actually in the book talking about addictions of various kinds, right? Of gambling and other things like that that exist. But then by the end of the book, you're actually talking about the idea that you hope that even though there are scars and even though there are permanent harm is done, you're finding you're praying beautifully for ways to not try to erase them, but to sort of grow through them. I wonder if you'd comment on either of those.
I think that each one of us, I mean, it's so weird how quickly things are opening up right now.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden, oh, well, the mask requirement is gonna, Trader Joe's and Walmart and Costco, they're all saying, you don't need to wear masks anymore. And pretty soon we're not going to need to wear masks anymore. And I'm not ready. I don't know how many of you feel that way. I'm just like, really? It's just all happening so quickly. The opening up. Of course, I'm so grateful to be fully vaccinated. But I don't think that any one of us has yet fully made sense, comprehended what we've just lived through.
Yeah.
It's going to take some time.
Yeah.
It's going to take some time. At Nashuva, I spoke about, the end of the flood. That was for me the paradigm that really is powerful. I think I was talking to Rabbi Moshe M about this. He was the one who first pointed this out to me, and I was taking it a little further, just like the flood is over and the water is starting to recede. And, Noah, first sends out the raven, comes back. It's not safe out there. Then he sends out the dove and sends around and hoping that it's going to be a sign that it's okay. If she doesn't come back, it means there's life out there. She comes right back. you know, when will it be safe? And it's sort of like this process of like sending out the dove, like just going out a little bit and coming back. Like, when is it going to be safe? When is it going to feel safe? And I don't think any of us feels 100% safe yet. We're just kind of, maybe the ark has rested on Mount Ararat, but we just keep sending out the dove, waiting for the olive branch, and then waiting till she doesn't come back anymore, because that means she's found her place out there, not in here. And I think we've all become more internal. And there are many, many blessings about becoming more internal. And if you're by nature more of an introvert, maybe that muscle has gotten a little bit too strong. I think extroverts particularly have learned a great deal about themselves in this past year and so many months. But I would say that each one of us, as we're making sense of what we've lived through, and we're still just beginning at the beginning of making sense of it, because you can only start to make sense of something when you can finally breathe a sigh of relief. And we're not quite yet ready for the full sigh of relief, but when we get there, we're going to be able to see what are the false comforts that we have been relying upon during this time that don't serve us anymore. Not true comfort. There are true comforts, but there are false comforts that maybe don't serve us anymore. Maybe one of those, it might feel like a perfect comfort, but maybe one of those is binge watching TV for too many hours, Maybe it worked during the pandemic, but maybe now we can say it's time to come out from that. But the other is that they say on average, Americans gain 2 pounds every month during the pandemic. That means on average, many, many Americans gained more than 24 pounds during the pandemic. And there's no question that food is comfort. But now we can look at that and say, maybe it's a false comfort. There's a way in which it's a true comfort. I love that movie, Ratatouille. I don't know if you've ever seen that animated film. And the minute like he tastes this crotchety food critic, tastes the ratatouille, and he goes, Mama! Like suddenly he's taken back to his mother's kitchen. How food can take us to a sweet place, but not if we're using it as a crutch.
Right.
And whatever we are doing that we know is not healthy for us and hasn't been healthy for us. Some of us are taking too many sleeping pills to get to sleep. Some of us are eating too much. Some of us are online way too much. And whatever it is, some of us are drinking too much. So whatever it is that's gotten us through up to now may not serve us. And I think this is the time that we can begin to sort of peel back the veil and see what have been the true comforts that gave us power, hope, inspiration during the pandemic. And what were the false comforts that kind of got us by, but actually made us feel worse in the end? Like we're worse for our health, but we kind of got by on them, but they really weren't for our health.
Nice.
The other question that you're asking me is about our scars. And yes, we all carry scars from this situation. Each one of us in our own way. And I'd like to believe, I've taught at the beginning of the pandemic that one of the beautiful pieces of having endured this together is sometimes somebody goes through a trauma and they went through it alone and they feel nobody understands me. How could anybody understand what I've been through? But what we've gone through is something we've gone through together as a community, as a world community. And so we won't have to say nobody understands. We can say, you remember when what it was like then, that we all understand each other. Now, of course, the pandemic didn't have consciousness. It didn't choose between us. But of course, it revealed scars in our society.
Yeah.
It revealed not only the unity that we're all in this together, it revealed scars.
Yeah.
That there's a pandemic that seems, yes, to know the difference between rich and poor, between white people and people of color, between the healthy and the weak, between the old and the young. It revealed those cracks. And part of our job, it's our job, now that it's revealed the cracks. You know, at the beginning, there was this kind of fantasy that this pandemic is showing us unity. Oh, look how the whole world is gathering together to cheer from the balconies. And look how in Israel, Jews and Arabs are joining together for one common enemy. And look how like 40% of Israel's doctors and nurses are Arab. And look how we're just all like in this beautiful thing together. Well, the pandemic also revealed the crack lines, and it's our job to repair what we know is broken in our society and in our world and in Israel.
Yeah,
it's
beautifully.
And the other piece is that our scars, without a question, are our teachers. It's from them that we learn our strength. It's from having been through something awful that we learn what we're made of, that we learn empathy, that we learn compassion, that we learn how to help other people. It's through the scars that they're the ones that help us, that teach us really what we're here for, what we were put here for.
Nice, beautiful. By the way, I would just add one thing, since we haven't talked about Nashuva very much. You have a beautiful interpretation of Ruth that you've shared, Naomi, and I think that what's remarkable about the way that you bring joy into Judaism. I had somebody say to me about a month ago, when we were going through the challenging period, seems minor now compared to the last week of pain and suffering that we as a people and in Israel, over the skies of Israel and the homes of Israel, and Hamas controlled Gaza, all of it is puts it all in perspective. But back when we were observing Yom HaShoah and when we were observing Yom HaZikaron, somebody said to me, does it always have to come from pain that Judaism gets renewal, that Judaism gets reinvented, that Judaism gets revitalized? Does it always come from narrow and difficult times? And that helped me think about the circle dance. It helped me think about something, an amazing community like Nashuva. In other words, all we really need to do, yes, pain can be a source of a teacher. Our scars can be our teachers, and we can face them and call ourselves Mara and then find a way to grow. But it's also the case that we can just put our hands around the shoulders of the person on either side of us and start going in a circle and find a tremendous sense of joy. And joy can also be transformative. And I wonder if you'd comment on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back to my mom, Ruth.
Yeah.
Because I would say by nature, I'm more introverted. My mom was more extroverted. And I remember she came to visit me in LA when I had maybe just first moved into an apartment in a building in LA. It was like a small apartment, like a multi-unit building. Maybe there were at most, 7 or 8 different units in this building. And my mom came to visit me and she said, so who lives here? I said, I don't know. And the truth is, I also back then, when I first moved to LA, I had a fear of dogs that was, I think, bordering on pathological. And one of my neighbors had like a massive, an Irish wolfhound,
Oh my
and
God.
and I was petrified. So I was afraid to go back, even to get my own mail. Somebody had to take my mail from the mailbox and bring it to my door because I was so petrified of this dog. But anyway, she said, "Who lives here?" And I said, "I don't know." And within, I don't know, maybe she stayed with me for 2 weeks. And within 2 weeks, my mom introduced me to my own neighbors. My mom came from Brooklyn and she moved to Brookline, and she was a widow and she was bereft. And she was not a young woman. And she came to Brookline, and in a very short period of time, she built for herself friendships, deep friendships. And she joined a community and she was welcomed with open arms. And I think it's from her that I learn and I pray for the ability to widen my circle and what it means to see that life is not about getting ahead. How far ahead am I? How much do I make? How, whatever. It's not this way. It's not linear. It's always that question, the Jewish question. It's how big is the circle and who am I going to invite into that circle? Who am I going to let in?
Nice. Nice. Beautiful. Beautiful.
So my blessing for all of you who are taking part, I can't see because I'm on that speaker view, so I don't know how many people are with us or who's from KI and who's from Nashuva. It doesn't really matter because those of you from KI you're just part of my family. And those of you from my Nashuva, you're my brothers and my sisters. But I'm blessing you that each one of us can turn back from Mara and rename ourselves as Naomi. And that whatever your grudge you may be carrying, whatever chip on your shoulder you may be carrying, whatever hurt you may be carrying, whatever prejudice you may be carrying, whatever anger toward others you may be carrying, whatever anger toward God you may be carrying, that all of that will give way to a welcoming. And that you will move from a place of famine, of emptiness, of loss, to a state of abundance and health and healing and comfort and new beginnings.
Amen. Amen. I wonder if we would be so fortunate to close. I know that there were questions in the chat, although I apologize if we didn't quite get to them, but I really feel impelled, with everyone's permission, to invite you, Naomi, to share with us a prayer you composed that actually was published in the forward before Shabbat, that speaks very much to our fears, our worries, our yearnings, our sense of despair, the challenges that the last week have laid bare. You always seem to find the words to help us talk to God and to draw strength from God and from each other. And so I wonder if you'd close with that prayer for us now.
I'm just sending my love to our brother, David, who lives in Israel with his family. And they are on Kibbutz Mishmar Negev, just maybe 20 minutes at most from Gaza. And literally across the street from a very large Arab city in Israel. And that there be peace for everyone in Israel. So a prayer for peace in Israel. God, our hearts are breaking. Our brothers and sisters in Israel crouch in fear as sirens pierce the air and rockets from Gaza rain down from the sky. We pray that all Israelis, Jews and Arabs, will live in peace. We pray for the day that the riots in the streets of Israel will give way to the sound of children playing, when hate will be healed, and the sound of sirens will give way to songs of hope. We are all God's children, and in God's light, we are all one. We pray there be no more violence or bloodshed within Israel, and we pray that Israelis and Palestinians will find a path to peace. Hear our people's prayers, and hear the prayers of innocent civilians in Gaza who share our longings for an end to this conflict. God, watch over Israel, over all our brothers and sisters who live there. Spread your shelter of peace over the Holy Land and all its inhabitants. Bring peace, God. Let it rain down from the heavens like a mighty storm. Let it wash away all hatred and bloodshed. Peace, God. Please, God.
Amen. 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 Thank you so much. This has been so special, Rabbi Naomi Levy. We are deeply honored by your presence, your intimacy, your love for our community, the way that you evoked the central book of this festival and brought the first fruits of your being to honor your mom and ensure that her light and her lessons for you and yours continue to bring so much nourishment into our world. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me and for inviting me. And I'm just wishing you and your whole community and the whole Nashuva community a wonderful Chag Sameach and a wonderful Shavuot.
Thank you so very, very much. Honored to have Nashuva with us. And thank you again. Chag Sameach, Rabbi Levy.
Lots of love.
Chag Sameach. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.